All right, welcome to week 6. So we're going to talk about selecting the criteria and selecting your alternatives today. And I want to be, what do I want to say? I want this to be a supplement to your reading, right? I don't really want to rehash the reading. So I'm not going to walk you through exactly what Bardak and Potashnik write um, about these steps. You can read that on your own, and it's the assigned reading anyhow. I want to add maybe a little bit of background that I think would be useful before you delve into that. The first thing I would say about selecting criteria is like select that which is measurable and make measurable that which isn't. Um, think about measurements a lot, a lot. Think deeply about them, right? You can always break down a measurement into components. So I'm going to give you an example right now, which is the U.S. poverty line, the official poverty measure. We talk about this in social policy in 510, but I think it's just kind of a simple example people are familiar with. What is the poverty line? Actually, it's a measure of income, right? And it's one measure of income. It's a measure of annual income. Uh, so it's unidimensional. It's one dimension, and that dimension's income. It's not wealth, right? You can be a billionaire and have no income and still qualify for income restricted things. And it's not deprivation. Nobody's going in and seeing how much food is in your fridge before you get food stamps, or if you have a freezer full of venison, even though you have no income or whatever the heck. Um, Nobody checks that, right? It's a measure of income. It's a measure of annualized income based on how many people live in your household, adjusted for the consumer price index, meaning inflation adjusted year to year. And that's all it is. And so it's a single it's an objective, single-dimensional measure of income. Now, in Europe, you might have an objective, single-dimensional measure of income, but it's a little bit different. Instead of being an absolute number, it might actually be relative to what the median, meaning the absolute middle person, earns in that country in that year. So in that case, it's still annual, it's still absolute, it's still an objective measure, it's still a measure of income, but now it's a relative one instead of an absolute one, right? Because the US one is just a flat number that goes up by inflation over time, and the European one will go up or down as people make more or less money in the country. And what does that do conceptually? But it means, hey, look, in European poverty metrics, they're keyed to inequality. The more unequal the country gets, the more poverty there will be by definition. In America, it's not keyed to that. As long as you're getting some basic level of income, you can have a bajillion dollars on the other side, and inequality can grow and grow and grow, and poverty won't necessarily grow with it. So poverty then isn't a relative inequality of goods in the United States. It's an absolute minimum standard. Where in Europe they conceptualize it maybe a little bit differently, and the UN uses these much more complicated, multidimensional measures where they're looking at housing and they're looking at food and they're looking at sort of income and wealth and all these different things. And the U.S. has a supplemental poverty measure that's a little bit more like that too. But we don't use it for most eligibility criteria. So when you're selecting criteria, like this is the type of thing to think about, right? Like, what does this number actually mean, even if you have a number? What goes behind it? How is it calculated? You can report GDP, and that's usually what like the news will report as economic growth. But what is actually GDP? Well, you break the equation down. Oh my God, GDP equals all of the income earned in a country over the course of a year, plus all of the government spending in a country over the course of a year, plus everything consumed, so purchased in that country over the course of a year. So the income that's not consumed is obviously invested, right? And then plus everything exported minus everything imported. And once you realize, like, oh my God, there's an equation that goes into GDP, and that's how they actually calculate it. And so if imports go up and exports go down, GDP can actually shrink, even if people are buying more and people are investing more and government spending more. Oh, that's weird, or government by cutting spending actually can shrink the economy. Oh, I didn't think they could do that. Oh yeah, well, government spending's a piece of GDP. When you start to wrap your head around how these numbers work and what they're actually telling you, You can learn a whole heck of a lot about what the criteria are you're talking about. Um, so sometimes things don't lend themselves well to numeracy, right? Sometimes things aren't easy to count or quantify, and that's okay. We can have qualitative descriptions of things too. We describe the quality more than start counting stuff. But when you're doing that, somebody has to make the expert assessment, and somebody has to go around doing it, and it gets complicated because you need people with expertise. You need to say what they're actually going to be looking at and making qualitative judgments about. And you have to be as specific as possible as well, even if you're not using quantitative measures. And then you need to say, like, who will be doing it and how will we fund that? Um, it's not easy, right? And a lot of times they pick annual income because you do taxes every year. So that data is just sort of floating out there in the Treasury Department at the IRS, and it's something that's relatively available compared to other things. There's not really a good national accounting of everyone's wealth, believe it or not. Banks might have some idea, but you could have your money squirreled in a bunch of different banks, right? It might be in some brokerage accounts and some checking accounts and 401ks, IRAs, 529s. Lord knows what you've done. It's not necessarily a great overall picture of that unless people really dig in. Um, so think about like what's out there too as you start selecting criteria. Like what can you actually find? What is actually reported? What is actually workable in terms of implementing a policy? Now you could think, well, heck, it's worth it. We should hire a ton of people and measure wealth for everyone. Maybe it is. But boy, now that project's gotten a lot bigger and a lot more expensive, right? So as you're like selecting criteria, think deeply about that. And then when you're constructing alternatives, you generally want to have one alternative be the status quo or the baseline scenario or something like that, right? And then you want to discuss changes to it from there. So you may have one, two, three alternatives. You may have a whole suite of alternatives and then pick and choose from among them or portions of each of them to put together a policy package at the end. You may put out option A, B, and C and choose option B. But like I said, you might have item A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H that address the policy. And you might say, hey, in the end of the day, I suggest maybe doing a little bit of A, maybe a little less of B, maybe all of C, maybe don't do D, but do E, F, and G, and come up with a, suite of policies that you think should be enacted at the same time in order to address the problem. So there are different ways to set up your alternatives. But your alternatives, in order to compare apples to apples, in order to say, like, how am I moving the needle, you need to clearly define what the goals are and should be. You need to define those as specifically as possible. And you need to select the criteria that you're going to measure qualitatively or quantitatively that shows movement towards those goals. And you should be able to apply it fairly to every alternative if possible. The last thing you want to do is be comparing apples and oranges. So think deeply about this and read these chapters carefully. And like I said a couple weeks ago with the table instructions scenario, be as specific as possible. Tell me the exact length and type of bolt and what it's made out of and exactly which hole that's pre-drilled in the tabletop it goes into. Don't leave it up to chance or mystery. The more specific you can be, the better this proposal, if you're making a proposal, in this case, this analysis will turn out being. So, you don't want to get so technical with your suggestion that, it's illegible to leaders and people who need to make the decision. But you do want to get technical enough where it's very obvious that this is a replicable study. People can go back and find the data you're using and that, you're being fair in making your comparisons between alternatives. So with that in mind, I will leave you, in the next video will be the very last video. I hope you've enjoyed these so far.